Planet Coaster 2 has been out for just over a month now, which has given me a good amount of time to get to grips with it. I was a huge fan of the original game, so how does this one stack up, and is it worth getting? Also, what does the future hold for this title, and why has there been some controversy about the game recently? I'll cover all of this in my review. In a way, I think there's two ways to look at Planet Coaster 2. One is seeing it as a management video game, and the other is seeing it as a creative suite to build amazing parks and roller coasters. Which of these you're looking for will greatly affect your enjoyment, but personally I kind of enjoy playing it both ways. Let's start off by looking at it as a game and checking out the career mode. This features 18 different levels spread across 4 chapters, and each level has a variety of challenges to earn up to 4 stars. The stars unlock new sets of levels, which in turn allows greater access to the tech tree, which is something I'll come back to shortly. The levels themselves are generally pretty good and offer some interesting scenery to build around. This can add to the challenge as you twist a coaster around a rocky outcrop, or try to squeeze another flat ride into the limited space. All the levels are visually quite different too, and in general they're a strong point to inspire you to build coasters that take advantage of the terrain. For the most part, each level's goals are fun to engage with and complete. Some of them even gently ease you into the coaster builder by giving you an unfinished ride and asking you to join up the missing pieces. They can also give a bit of inspiration for what to build next by having a minimum number of flat rides or a coaster with certain statistics. Some of the challenges can be a bit repetitive though, such as ones which make you go for a high scenery rating. And most of the time to achieve this I ended up just plopping down random bits of scenery and theming in empty spaces of the park until I reached the required level. There's also a few later levels which have some goals that just were not fun to beat. For example, in this level, you have to intentionally build rides with a high nausea rating, which sort of goes against the general philosophy of coaster design. You can fudge it a little by increasing a lift hill or launch speed so a coaster takes elements too quickly, and then you can then reduce that after the star is unlocked. But this just didn't seem like a very good goal to try and unlock in general, although I guess it did make me rethink how I was designing coasters at the time. That's how I ended up with this weird design that you probably wouldn't want to ride in real life. There was also one level which had the challenge to build a coaster with a 35 metre or 114 foot drop that never exceeded 37 miles per hour, and the only way I could get this to work was with this monstrosity, where the whole drop has brakes going down. Why would you set a challenge like that? It's just designing a coaster that's not going to be fun. I did try other workarounds, such as a spinning coaster with a very shallow long drop, but the game just had difficulty recognising that as an actual drop, and it always went too fast, or I just couldn't get it to work any other way than building this. I also found that in the end I was able to complete a lot of the level objectives without fully utilising the park space, which is also a bit of a shame, considering that the terrain is very interesting here and could be fun to build around if there were more objectives to complete. There's nothing to stop you from adding more stuff to the park once the objectives are done, but it kind of feels a bit hollow and pointless once you've completed the level. Believe it or not, there's also some sort of story attached to the career mode, with introductions to each level given by a cast of characters, and updates given when you beat certain milestones. There's also an outro when you finish the scenarios, but honestly this added little to the game, and what story there is was instantly forgettable. Now, going back to the unlock system and the tech tree, this is an area that I think is a bit of a miss. Each chapter requires a set number of stars to unlock, and this in turn makes more of a tech tree available to research. This means in early levels you're very limited in what coasters and rides you can actually build, and the only way to change that is to unlock later levels and come back to the early ones when you've got more unlocks. Personally, I don't like this tech tree design, and I think it could be much better. For one thing, unlocking tech is not very engaging. Basically, you just have to put down a research hut, and your research points gradually tick up as the park continues running. The way things unlock and how they're held behind checkpoints just encourage you to rush through the levels to unlock what you actually want to build in a park, rather than sticking with the level to full completion with all stars. It also means that, other than in early levels, you aren't really encouraged to use a specific coaster for a park. Personally, I think it could be much more interesting if you were forced to use a limited number of coasters in specific parts, and at different points in the career. Imagine, for example, a level where you could only use coaster tech from the 80s or 90s, ending up with a retro park with Schwarzkopf and Arrow rides, or a park where you could only build boomerang or shuttle rides, you'd probably end up with something like Wallaby Belgium. Also, when you do unlock stuff, rides and coasters are grouped together in really quite arbitrary categories. For example, unlocking a bunch of tower rides or a set of launch coasters. To me, it does seem just a bit weird how they're grouped together, especially when one of the last coasters you unlock is a Schwarzkopf-style looper that's way more dated than the modded coasters you've been building up until that point. In my head, there's a different version of career mode where you forge relationships with ride manufacturers and they reward you accordingly. By designing popular, highly rated coasters using their rides, they then offer you an expanded catalogue, or maybe give you the chance to build a new prototype ride at a discount. New coasters could also be unlocked based on the time period they were originally created, and this could allow for some more organic growth to each park. The developers have gone to great effort in grouping rides by fictional manufacturers based on their real-life counterparts, where Intamin becomes Automax, Mack becomes Big M, and Aerodynamics becomes Dark Kinetics, but this never has any impact on gameplay and is just effectively a pun based on the names. One of the new additions to the game is water and power management, which, if I'm being honest, is more of an annoyance than an interesting feature. Having to build a new power generator and distributor when you build a new ride is just not very fun, and those generators just seem to break down or need refurbishment all the time. Similarly, water pumping and treatment works in a similar manner, and is equally more of an annoyance than a fun gameplay feature. There's also some unlocks in the tech tree that are never properly explained. Does a water tower or underground well replace a water pump? Why would I want one or the other? Also, you can unlock large or small solar generators, but these are never explained either. They just seem to be a different size and capacity of generator. I think there was even one in the career levels which mentioned solar power use, but they never factored that into gameplay and you could just build as many normal generators as you desired. Choosing a power source could have made an interesting gameplay decision. For example, running costs of rides could be lower with solar due to free renewable energy, but maybe with a bigger initial expenditure and the risk of power outages in extreme weather. There doesn't seem to be any impact on gameplay. However, as I said, managing electricity and water just turns into an annoyance, although to be fair, both these options can be turned off in the menu. Water parks are the headline feature of this sequel, and the new path and plaza making tools allow you to create a pool in pretty much any shape you desire, and in all likelihood, the first one you make will probably look like a cock and balls unless you're more mature than I am. There's a variety of water slides as well to make, with a good selection of track pieces, but the physics of the ride do seem a bit wonky. Riders seem to be stuck to the flumes as if they're on rails, which just doesn't look right at times. They also seem to follow predetermined paths through special elements, which seem to ignore physics. As for making interesting pools, there are only a few interactable scenery elements you can add to them, which is rather disappointing. The only interactables are one sun lounger, 2 diving boards, and a handful of steps to get guests out of the pool. I'd prefer to see more variety from the sun loungers, some showers or fountains, maybe some jacuzzis, pals inflatables or beach balls that guests will use, but there's none of that. Guests can buy Lilos or ring inflatables from a shop and will sometimes use them in pools, but any ones you place in or around the pool just behave like static objects that they'll ignore. Lazy rivers are also something that's not very intuitive to build, and I only actually found out how to make them in the process of doing this review. If you do build one, guests may just ignore it or use it like a normal pool than an actual lazy river, and there's no way to connect a series of pools at different levels with slides to make an interesting ride that guests will treat as one sort of unit. If I'm being honest, it does seem a bit like the water park editions, which I'll repeat is the main headline feature of this game, are rather underbaked or almost unfinished, and could do with more content to make for a proper worthy addition to this game. One area that I think has been improved though in the sequel is the coaster builder, which is an enhancement to the system used in the prequel. The smoothing tool now works much better and it allows you to make coasters with much smoother transitions than in the previous game. One of the patches also seems to have made it a bit easier to choose the different ends of track and make it clearer where the entry and exit points of the station are. It's also added a separate load and unload stations, although when I briefly experimented with this I wasn't able to get it working properly. Most of the elements you choose do seem to be the repeats from the previous game, and it's a bit of a shame not to see any new ones. There's no step-up underflips, dog tongues, or double inverting stalls, and it just seems to be copy-pasted from the last game what elements you can build by default. The editor is flexible enough to allow you to make any element you can by doing it piece by piece, but some more original elements would have been nice. Coaster supports can also be a bit of a mixed bag and generally look okay for something that's being procedurally generated. There is some new top hat elements for Intamin launch coasters which look a lot better than in the last game, but unfortunately there's only one size of piece to enter this element, so if you build it too tall then you're just going to get far too much g-force in this too sharp uplift or pull out from the drop. The design I've built here is pretty much the tallest you can go when you use the top hat element as it stands. Of course, you can build one without using the top hat, but they end up looking a bit ridiculous. As you can see here, where I've managed to do a coaster that goes 175 miles an hour and reach 800 feet. And the stats are still rideable for it, but the supports just look horrendous. The ability to resize scenery is a real game changer, and when combined with adding pieces to rides and coaster cars, it can open up a world of creativity when you're building custom things. The new mythology and Viking scenery themes all look great, but they seem to have replaced themes in the original Planet Coaster rather than adding to them. What sort of theme park game doesn't come with any pirate scenery or Wild West scenery? It's completely missing in this game. These are fundamental theme park tropes, and they're just absent. Sure, you can create your own buildings in any theme using the tools provided, or download community creations from the workshop, but shouldn't there be some more default buildings in popular themes that you see in all parks? You shouldn't have to rely on the game's community to fill in the gaps, and I'd have been perfectly happy if all the original Planet Coaster scenery could have just been imported into this game and used as you want, as the overall art style hasn't even changed, so the original assets would look fine in this sequel. Flat rides in the game also operate in pretty much the same as the original, and you can create custom sequences as you would expect. Unfortunately though, drop towers and other tower-based rides only come in one size each, which is a bit disappointing. I would have hoped that there could be some customization to make the ride the height you want it to be, but you only have the choice between one short shot tower, one massive drop tower, and nothing in between. The graphics in Planet Coaster 2 look fine and are an incremental improvement over the first game. Running at higher resolutions is also now more feasible thanks to technologies such as FSR and DLSS, although this does produce some ghosting artifacts in my system. Frame generation is also available, but only for Nvidia cards, but maybe it'll be added for other users later on. Performance is generally pretty decent, and in this park I've added pretty much one of every single different kind of coaster and one of every kind of flat ride, with some rather huge rides to mix things up. It still remains quite playable with all this going on though. This is with a cap of 6,000 people in the park, however I think that cap can now be changed thanks to the latest patch, so it may drop the frame rate if you add in too many guests. The game also runs and is quite playable on the Steam Deck, which should make my next long-haul flight a lot more enjoyable. I haven't experienced too many bugs while playing, and I can't recall any major crashes that caused me to lose progress. Having said that though, no one ever seems to want to ride the racetracks that I've built, even if you add some scenery around it, and that scenery just doesn't seem to count to make the ride more appealing. Also, despite making rides that are all green for stats, often people just don't seem to want to ride them, which seems a bit odd. Crowds in general feel a bit more fickle than in the prequel, and it's rare to see big queues for rides developing, even if to me you've built an awesome coaster that everyone should really want to ride. Compared to the original Planet Coaster, there's also quite a few things that have either been removed or are yet to be added to the game. Planet Coaster did after all have several free updates that added features, but at present the sequel doesn't have any restaurants, no hotels, no security guards, and there's also no snow or winter biome, and there aren't any motorbike coasters or bobsled coasters, and no arrow suspended coaster either. Before the game was announced, there were actually some rumours of a partnership with Disney, so maybe it's possible that some of these features will be added or are being held back with a DLC pack. For example, maybe there'll be a Frozen add-on which could add the winter biome and a coaster like the one at Hong Kong Disneyland, and maybe motorcycles are being held back for some sort of Tron DLC. Who knows? The future does look quite brightish for the game, I think, though, as the devs have promised reworking things like the water slide physics and various other improvements. However, despite them promising some fixtures and extra enhancements coming soon, they've still gone ahead and released some premium DLC featuring 2 coasters and 3 flat rides for about £8. This to me feels a bit off. For a start, it's pretty bare bones delivery of DLC, which doesn't seem to offer that much value, and there's no additional scenery, which was a feature of the original Planet Coaster's DLC. Also, releasing it this soon sort of gives the impression that they just want to make money from the project, rather than have that dedication to ongoing improvements and adding additional features to the game. Goodwill in the community is priceless, and had this handful of rides being released as a free add-on, as a free option, it would have sent a much better message to those who have already bought the game, and that the devs and publishers want to improve the experience and add value, rather than trying to gouge players for as much money as possible. You just have to take a glance at the Steam reviews after the DLC was released to get the feeling of resentment players have for this, and how that feeling could have been so much more different if they'd given some bonus new rides or coasters for free. The original Planet Coaster added new rides, scenery, and scenarios all for free before any DLC was offered, and when the DLC was released, it had a whole bunch of extra scenery and things to add value, rather than just the handful of rides they put together for this one. Hopefully the next paid DLC will be done correctly, maybe adding a load of pirate and adventure scenery, and adding a Mahuka-style single-rail coaster, an arrow-suspended coaster, and a Juvaline-style quad-bike coaster with a jet ski or train option as well. And maybe a few more flat rides too, and different varieties heights of drop towers. But that all seems quite a lot to ask when they just seem to want to make more money. So overall, I've probably been quite negative and critical of this game in this review, but I think that's probably because it's a game that I really enjoy and am passionate about, and the missteps that have been made are things that I think can and hopefully will be changed or improved. If you want to build the coaster or park of your dreams but find No Limits 2 a bit too technical and complicated, then Planet Coaster 2 is generally the best option out there for this. Is it worth the price of admission? I'd again say yes, as I know I've spent many hours in the original building parks and coasters, and this game is just as good at those fundamental things, but with an even better coaster builder. It's a game I'll happily spend an evening relaxing, playing, whilst listening to a podcast or audiobook in the background, and it's just something that's fun to do. I really hope this game will evolve over time, and more content will be added, and the devs will put a bit more thought into the value offered by each DLC. Maybe we'll even see some way to import stuff from the original game, as that could add immense value to the game's community. As it stands now though, I would still recommend getting Planet Coaster 2, and I hope you've enjoyed my take on the game. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments, and if there's any demand for it, I might even consider doing a review of Parkitect or another theme park builder. I've been Roller Coaster David, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again in another video very soon.